it doesn't start with screaming. It starts with a whisper soft, distant, like wind through reeds or breath against a microphone. It lasts only 17 seconds. No melody, no language. Just a low, irregular hum and a static hiss that seems to shiver in your ear. The first person to hear it was a forest ranger in northern Oregon. He found the cassette inside an unlabeled envelope nailed to the door of a firewatch station. He played it. That night, he left a voicemail for his sister. He said, "I think there's someone talking behind the noise. Not in it, behind it." By morning, he was missing. The station was locked from the inside. The cassette was gone. That was 1,997. Since then, copies of the audio, sometimes digital, sometimes analog, have appeared in places no one can trace. A burned disc found inside a church wall in Italy. A voicemail left on a disconnected line in Taipei. A USB stick mailed to a museum in Buenos Aires with no return address. They all contain the same pattern. They all sound almost human, and they all do something to your mind the longer you listen. Not all at once, but you'll start to hear breathing when you're alone. And after a while, you'll hear it breathing with you. The recordings don't come from one place. They don't follow one format. They simply appear. Some arrive on analog cassettes, decades old, coated in dust and mold. Others are digitally-mailed with no sender, uploaded to forgotten servers, hidden inside corrupted zip files with file names like Listen, Last, WAV, or Sleepwalk.003. One turned up encoded into the EXIF data of an unrelated photo posted to an abandoned blog. Another was embedded inside a QR code painted beneath an overpass in Tokyo. And yet, the sound is always the same. Same hiss, same pitch, same whisper, just beneath perception. Efforts to trace the origin have failed. The oldest known sample predates modern equipment found etched into a wax cylinder among the possessions of a deceased radio engineer in 1932. He wrote that the sound reminds me of being watched by something with no eyes. Places where the tape is discovered tend to share strange qualities. Rooms with distorted acoustics, buildings with low resonance frequencies, sites where people report phantom voices, headaches, or the sensation of someone standing behind them, just out of view. Researchers who've handled the recordings report similar dreams. A staircase spiraling downward endlessly, while something whispers in a language they don't understand, but know they've heard before. It's not tied to a culture. It's not part of folklore. And yet it keeps showing up. Always in the quiet. Always where no one should be listening. The first documented incident tied directly to the audio occurred in 2003, when a sound technician in Prague began analyzing a clip found on a used reel of magnetic tape. Within days, he began suffering auditory hallucinations. He claimed his own breathing no longer matched his body, as if someone else was syncing with him. He wrote in his notes, "It doesn't mimic me. It waits for me to mimic it." By the end of the week, he removed the sound card from his computer and buried it beneath concrete in a forest outside the city. He left behind a single labeled CD, mailed anonymously to a university lab in Stockholm. The file name was trueform.org. Since then, the phenomenon has followed a pattern. A recording appears. Someone listens. At first, it seems harmless, just ambient noise, static, maybe a distant hum like wind through a tunnel. But the more closely one listens, the more they notice layers, subtle shifts in tone, rhythms that match brainwave frequencies, breathing patterns that adjust to the listener's own. One audio engineer in Detroit built a spectrogram of the signal and noticed a structuria face, faint but undeniably human-shaped, formed in the frequency curve. He deleted the project an hour later and refused to speak about it again. But the most disturbing incident came from a man named Jason Kale, a sleep researcher in Colorado. He subjected himself to a 90-minute loop of the audio to test its neural effects. He didn't sleep for 5 days after. On the 6th, he left a message on a colleague's voicemail. There's something inside the waveform. Not a voice, a location. Then he vanished. All that was found in his apartment was his laptop, still playing the file. Looping, volume, 0. Playback time, 1,273 hours. You can't touch it. You can't see it. But the audio behaves like an object. No matter the format: cassette, Washington 5th, Florida AC, reel to reel, it preserves itself, even through degradation. Tapes that should be unreadable still play. Files corrupted beyond recovery suddenly open on specific machines. One instance was printed out as binary waveform and later decoded using hand-typed code. Still, the same sound emerged. Attempts to clean or isolate the track always fail. Filters break down. Frequency analysis loops. The waveform behaves like it's shifting subtly, adapting itself to the system, or worse, to the listener. But it isn't just audio. In one test, a linguist ran the sound through a phonetic translator. It returned no known language, but the syllables it generated matched names found in obituaries from cities where the tape had surfaced. Not random names, recent ones. Other tests revealed micro-fluctuations in the amplitude, pulsing at rates similar to human heart rhythms. When matched to volunteers wearing EEG monitors, the waveform adjusted itself ever so slightly to match the brain activity of whoever was closest. The recording doesn't respond like data. It responds like something watching. One researcher, under hypnosis, described the file as a door made of breath. He said listening long enough allows you to slip through, not with your body, but with your thoughts. That's why the audio never needs to be loud. It only needs to reside inside you. Some believe the sound is an accidental echo of an unknown natural frequency, bouncing between dimensions. Others believe it was crafted, carefully built to bypass the ear and reach deeper into the parts of the brain that remember things that never happened. Whatever it is, the consensus is simple. It doesn't want to be heard. It wants to be kept. Some say the recording is an auditory virusa, self-replicating pattern not made of code but of cognition. It doesn't spread through devices. It spreads through attention. The moment you hear it, even faintly, it roots itself. And from then on, it doesn't need to be played again. You carry it. Others suggest it's a signal from elsewhere, not a transmission, but a reflex. Like sonar from something massive and blind, probing the universe for awareness. When we listen, we answer, not with words, but with the rhythm of our minds. There's a darker theory, too, that the audio is a form of bait, not meant for us, but for something beneath perception. A signal calling out across dimensions, disguised as noise. And webby listening are merely amplifiers, transmitters. That what comes after isn't madness, it's contact. A few have tried to silence it. Files deleted, tapes burned, servers wiped. But the sound always returns, sometimes in dreams, sometimes embedded in silence between songs, sometimes hidden in static when you lose signal on a long drive through empty countryside. Because it doesn't need a device, just a moment, a gap in the noise, a breath between thoughts. That's when it speaks again, not with words, not even with sound, but with the feeling that someone is in the room. You won't remember the moment it starts. You'll only notice that, eventually, you're humming something you don't remember hearing, and by then, it's already inside. It started with a security tape. A man walks into a government building in broad daylight, clean shirt, briefcase, security badge. He nods to the guard, signs the visitor log, and disappears down the hall. But when the shift ends and the log is reviewed, his signature is unreadable. The badge number doesn't match any employee. And the hallway? It leads to a locked records room. They roll back the camera. He's there, clear as day, but no one remembers seeing him leave. Facial recognition returns nothing. No matches on any database. No birth certificate. No tax ID. No biometric footprint anywhere. And it's not just him. Across continents, across years, images have surfaced. People captured on CCTV in the background of family photos, waving at dash cams. They speak. They smile. Sometimes they even leave a name. But when investigators follow up, nothing. No documents, no family. Not a single trace they were ever born. And what they all say, when questioned if they speak at Alice, chillingly consistent, I used to be real, before someone else took my place. The sightings span decades and continents, but the pattern never changes. In 2006, a woman in Marseille found a man sleeping in her parked car. He apologized, said his name was Emile D., and claimed to live 3 blocks away. Police were called. He was cooperative, calm, but when they searched the address, the building didn't exist. And Emile? No ID. No digital trace. Fingerprints matched. No one alive or dead. He was released. 3 days later, the footage of his arrest vanished from the precinct database. In 2011, a maintenance worker in Seoul snapped a photo of a stranger wandering the subway tunnels. The man appeared in several frames, always distant, always looking toward the camera. The photos uploaded fine, but when scanned for metadata, the man's face was flagged as an unrecognized layer. A bug, they said. A glitch in facial processing. But the same error code would appear in 8 other countries over the next 5 years. Some of the drifters speak multiple languages fluently. Others seem disoriented, confused by the year, the weather, or the technology. One claimed it was 1,983. Another refused to enter any building with glass doors, saying, "They don't open for me anymore." And yet, they're tangible. You can talk to them, photograph them, touch them, but they leave nothing behind. No paper, no calls, no footprint in systems that define the modern world. Not missing persons, not undocumented immigrants, just unaccounted for, as if they've slipped in from somewhere else, or were erased so cleanly, only their shadows remain. In 2017, a government clerk in Warsaw flagged a minor irregularity during a passport renewal. A man named Tomasz Alikmid, 30s, Polish national, had submitted paperwork, fingerprints, and a valid address. Everything appeared normal until the system rejected his biometric scan, not as an error, but with a warning, identity already in use. The flag triggered an internal audit, cross-referenced against criminal databases, immigration records, military files. What they found wasn't a duplicate. It was a man with the same face, the same fingerprints, the same DNA who had died in 2003. His name, also Tomasz Alek. Death certificate, confirmed. Grave, real. The living Tomasz was questioned. He was calm, polite, confused. He remembered his childhood, his school, his job. But none of the people he named could verify knowing him. Photos he presented showed him smiling with co-workers, none of whom recalled his face. One woman insisted the photo had been digitally altered. He was placed under observation. Within 3 days, all files associated with him began corrupting. Email threads scrambled. Idaho cards blank. Voicemail logs erased. Not deleted. Emptied. On the 4th day, he disappeared from the facility. Surveillance footage captured the moment he left. He passed through a secured door without opening it. The frame glitched, as if overwritten. Then nothing. No exit. No trace. The only thing left behind was a single sheet of paper, found in his room, written in pen, block letters. This version was never supposed to persist. Reset recommended. No fingerprints. No ink residue. As if the paper had always been there, just waiting for someone to remember it. They never carry much. No phones, no ID, no credit cards. Some wear clothes with obsolete tags brands that no longer exist, or logos that haven't been used in decades. One man was found wearing a jacket from a military unit disbanded in 1972. He claimed it was new. Another had coins in his pocket with no markings at all, smooth metal discs, slightly warm to the touch. But the most consistent thing they leave behind is static. Not audible, not electrical, data static. Devices that capture them, cameras, mics, card readers, develop corruption. Not the usual kind. Files split into incomprehensible fragments. Images blur not with motion, but intent, as if the data actively resists resolution. An IT contractor in Munich analyzed CCTV footage of a man who matched no known ID. He tried to isolate a frame, but when he zoomed in on the subject's face, the pixels rearranged themselves into noise. Over and over, until he gave up. Then, days later, his personal photos, vacations, birthdays began to corrupt the same way. Always the faces, always the eyes. A physicist who reviewed magnetic recordings of one such person noted a faint, repeating signal hidden beneath the noise floor. Not sound, not data, but movementa wave pattern that looped, not in time, but in memory. When he played it back, the waveform generated a visual curve that mirrored a human fingerprint. It was not his. Others have tried biometric extraction, neural modeling, even hypnosis. But the outcome is always the same. You get fragments, faces, noms, glimpses, but no continuity, no origin, no proof. Just brief flashes of someone who shouldn't exist, insisting that they once did, and whatever brought them here may still be watching. Some call them data ghosts, residual identities that exist outside structured systems. Not spirits, but fragments. People who were once real, but whose paperwork, memories, and digital presence have been overwritten by something or someone. Not erased, just displaced. Others believe these individuals are echoes from discarded timelines, realities that collapsed or diverged, leaving behind survivors who somehow slipped through. They arrive confused, misplaced, and unable to fit inside the infrastructure of this version of the world. Their faces are familiar, their details are plausible, but they don't belong. There's a third theory. It's less popular, because it's more difficult to disprove, that these people are not people at all, that they are construct simulations inserted into reality to test how far the human mind will go to justify the presence of someone it can't verify. An experiment in plausibility, a stress test on trust. If someone shows up, smiles, tells a story, and looks real, how many layers must fail before we question their existence? Some investigators suggest a pattern. All known appearances occur near government facilities, airports, hospitals, border crossings, liminal spaces where identities are routinely checked and rechecked, places where failure to exist becomes visible. And then they vanish, not in dramatic ways. No bursts of light, no broken time. They simply aren't there anymore. Photos adjust themselves. Databases self-correct. Memories thin at the edges. And the strangest part? You may have seen one before. In a crowd, on a train, sitting in a cafe. You may have spoken to them, laughed with them, believed them, but if you try to remember their name now, can you? It started with a draft. A couple renovating their 1940s townhouse in Manchester noticed a chill behind the bookshelf in the study. When they pulled it aside, they found a door sealed shut with layers of old paint, no handle, no hinges, just a perfect rectangle in the plaster. They broke through. Inside was a narrow room, no windows, peeling wallpaper, a rusted metal bed frame, and a single wooden chair. On the floor, a child's drawing lay curled in the dust. Crayon. A house. A smiling sun. And in the corner, a black figure with no face. They took pictures, called a contractor, stepped out to make coffee. When they came back, the room was gone. Not just hidden gone. The wall was solid, studs intact, no gap behind it, the floor plan unchanged. The photos on their phones, blurred, glitched. One showed the wall. The other showed nothing at all. But that night, they heard a knock soft, slow on the wall behind the shelf, and a whisper, just barely audible. I liked when you visited. Why did you leave? These rooms don't exist on paper. Blueprints show clean lines, standard dimensions, measured space. But then, someone knocks on a wall that sounds hollow, or notices the hallway seems longer on one side than the other, or realizes their dog always avoids a particular corner of the house for no reason they can explain. They break through, and they find a room. Sometimes it's a closet, sometimes a crawl space. Once, it was a full staircase leading downward into nothing. These spaces show up in homes across the world. A brownstone in Brooklyn, a prefab bungalow in Sweden, a converted flat in Osaka. Some modern, some centuries old. No common origin. What links them is what's inside. Always something that suggests memory. A pair of shoes with no dust. A photograph nailed to a wall with unfamiliar face sex. Except one looks like you, but slightly off. A diary written in your handwriting, but with entries you never lived. And then, just as quickly as they appear, they vanish. Contractors come and see only insulation. Family members insist the room was never there. Even photographs warp furniture misaligned, shadows cast at the wrong angle. But those who found these rooms all describe the same feeling. A strange familiarity. As if the room wasn't built onto the house, but was always there, waiting to be noticed. In 2019, a woman named Lucia Martin moved into a small inherited cottage in northern Spain. The house had stood empty for nearly a decade. While organizing the attic, she noticed something strange. The floor space didn't match the ceiling below. There was an extra meter just missing. She tapped on the wall. Hollow, pulled up the floorboard, found a panel. Behind it, a doorless frame leading to a short staircase. She followed it down. The room was silent, windowless, and smelled faintly of lavender and damp wood. In the center stood a single cabinet, and on top of it, a framed photograph of her, as a child, standing with two people she didn't recognize. But what truly broke her was what was written on the back. First day home. She doesn't remember yet. Lucia ran upstairs, called a friend. When they returned hours later, the staircase was gone. Solid wall, no gap. And the photo? Still in her hand, but now the frame was blank. No image. Just reflective glass. Lucia isn't alone. In Chicago, a tenant found a locked room behind a built-in bookshelf. Inside, a vintage toy chest filled with items he remembers losing as a child in another country. One had his name carved in it, aged decades beyond possibility. When he tried to return, the room no longer existed. In Seoul, a teenager documented a hidden basement space with scratch marks on the walls and a mirror that reflected a different version of her bedroom down to the poster she hadn't hung yet. The deeper people go, the more the rooms seem to mirror, them showing moments they forgot, futures they never lived, or versions of themselves slightly misaligned. And every room has one thing in common. It knows when you're watching, and it only opens when it wants to be seen. The rooms differ in size, shape, even material. Some are cold concrete cells. Others are wallpapered in cheerful pastels, untouched by dust. But all of them contain one object: personal, specific, and impossible. A photograph of you as a child, wearing clothes you never owned. A toy that hums softly, only when the lights are off. A cassette tape labeled with your name but in someone else's handwriting. These objects never appear on security footage. They vanish when others are present. But when you're alone, they feel familiar. Like they were yours once, in a version of your life that ended differently. In one case, a man found a journal in a room hidden behind his kitchen wall. Each entry described a day from his life days that never happened, but felt real. On the final page, the handwriting changed. It read, "You're starting to remember too much. Close the door." He burned the journal. But the next morning, the kitchen was 1 meter smaller. Architects, physicists, and psychologists have tried to study these rooms. They call them non-Euclidean intrusions, spatial mirages, even cognitive feedback loops. But none of those explain why the rooms only open when no one else is around, or why the objects inside seem to anticipate who you are going to become. Because it's not just the room that changes. It's you. And when you walk back into your house, into the familiar walls and normal windows, something feels off. Like maybe the version of you that left didn't come back. Or worse, maybe the room kept the original, and you're what it let out. Some believe the rooms are psychic residue echoes of forgotten trauma, or alternate decisions made real. That every home contains more than its walls admit: regrets, past lives, unlived futures. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, those spaces bleed through. Others point to architecture itself, that these rooms are non-linear intrusions, where the laws of space twist inward, creating pockets that do not obey blueprints, but intention. That a house, once lived in long enough, begins to form its own memories, its own needs, and sometimes builds rooms for things we've tried to forget. A few believe the rooms are alive, not metaphorically, but sentient, that they call to certain people, open only when the house is quiet enough to listen, and offer not haunting but recognition. Because the most chilling theory isn't that these rooms hold objects from your life. It's that they hold objects from someone else's version of your life. And if that version came looking for you, would you know it wasn't you? One researcher claimed the rooms are recursive. Once opened, they continue to reappear in different homes, attached not to buildings, but to people. He mapped dozens of sightings across countries, time zones, even continents. The only common denominator? The person who found the room was never quite the same again. They forgot birthdays, missed appointments, sometimes forgot their own middle names. And always, they reported the same sensation, that their home felt slightly too large, even when they knew every wall by heart. You've seen him, not in a photograph, not in a film, but in your dream, standing just at the edge of the room. He never speaks. He never moves. He just watches. He's bald, slightly smiling, too symmetrical to be real. His face seems familiar, but not quite human-like. A wax figure built from memory. At first, no one thought anything of it. Just another face. conjured by the subconscious, until people started describing the same man across country, cultures, language. Hundreds of reports, all identical. A teenage girl in Argentina, a businessman in Germany, a nurse in South Korea. Each of them claimed the man stood in the background of their dream cylinder, smiling, sometimes in a crowd, sometimes alone, but always watching, always closer than before. When shown a police sketch compiled from reports, 80% of people said, "Yes, that's him. I don't know how, but I've seen him." The website tracking sightings is still online. It's called thisman.org. And if you're wondering whether you've seen him too, you have. The first known case dates back to 2006. A psychiatrist in New York was treating a patient with recurring nightmares. The man claimed a stranger would visit him while he slept, never harming him, never speaking, just standing there. When asked to draw the face, the patient produced a rough sketch. The psychiatrist left it on his desk. Within a week, 4 more patients unrelated, unknown to each other, pointed at the sketch and said the same thing. "That's the man from my dream." The story spread. Psychologists began collecting accounts. Over 2,000 reports have surfaced since from more than 70 countries. The descriptions never vary. He appears in train stations, in kitchens, on beaches. Sometimes he's far away, watching. Sometimes he stands at the foot of the bed, smiling. But he's always calm, always silent. And each time, the dreamer wakes feeling a little colder, a little less alone. But the real question isn't where he appears. It's when. Because the more cases are collected, the clearer it becomes. He shows up during moments of stress, transition, identity crisis, divorce, grief, illness, almost as if he's drawn to fractures in the mind, places where the psyche thins, where dreams no longer stay inside the dreamer. Some claim he leaves behind no trace. Others swear he changed something, a thought, a feeling, a memory that doesn't quite belong. But the most disturbing pattern? Every time someone dreams of him, they say the same thing when they wake. He was closer than last time. In 2012, a university sleep study in Tokyo attempted to document the phenomenon. 10 volunteers, all of whom had claimed to see the dream man, were monitored overnight in a controlled lab. Brain activity was mapped, REM cycles tracked. A neutral image of the man's face was shown before sleep. Nothing unusual occurred at first, but by the 3rd night, subjects began reporting identical dreams. Not just the same figure, but the same setting. A dimly lit hallway lined with mirrors. In each dream, the man stood at the far end, watching, smiling, closer each time. On the 4th night, 2 volunteers awoke screaming. Both had nosebleeds. One claimed he could still see the hallway when he closed his eyes. The other kept whispering a single phrase, "He knows I know him now." Security footage revealed a disturbance brief, localized electrical interference, around 3:17 a.m. All 10 hard monitors spiked. The video glitched for exactly 6 seconds. And when the feed resumed, one of the bedside monitors previously blank was now displaying a waveform. A voice recording, later extracted, revealed something else. Buried beneath static, layered with distortion, was a man's voice, whispering, "You brought me closer." The project was shut down. The participants signed NDAs. But the file leaked online years later, was taken down within 24 hours. Nah mirror backups, nah digital trace. Just a few transcriptions, posted by those who listened before it vanished. And every one of them claims the same thing. That night, they dreamed of a man standing in their room, face too still, smile too wide, and eyes that didn't blink because they weren't eyes at all. There is no physical artifact, no hair, no clothing, no blood. And yet, somehow, the man in the dreams leaves things behind. Some dreamers wake with marks, not scratches or bruises, but faint impressions on the skin, like pressure from a hand that was never there. Others report smelling cologne or hearing the sound of shoes on tile, even hours after waking. A few even claim to find notes beside their bed. Always the same handwriting. Always the same sentence. I saw you first. But what's most consistent is the face. Always the same bald head, broad forehead, arched eyebrows, faint smile. Not threatening, not welcoming, just present. When the first composite sketch circulated online, something strange happened. Thousands of people who had never spoken of their dreams came forward. They recognized him, not from the media, not from suggestion, but from before, from childhood nightmares, from dreams they had before the sketch ever existed. Some even claim they'd drawn him years earlier, as children, and their sketches matched. The face, some psychologists now argue, is a universal archetypa subconscious stand-in for the watcher, a psychological placeholder for the feeling of being observed. But skeptics are uncomfortable with how specific the details are, because it's not just a face. People report the same setting, the same hallway, the same lighting, the same smell of dust and heat, like they're not dreaming of a man, but dreaming through him, as if his presence is not a character, but a doorway. One theory suggests he is a signal broadcast through dreams from an unknown origin. Another says he is a constructed shared memory, slipped into the collective unconscious, for reasons no one fully understands. But a few researchers have stopped asking who he is and have started asking what happens when he finally reaches you. There are many theories. Some say he is a memena, the kind we laugh at, but the kind that spreads through minds like a contagion. A self-replicating image rooted so deeply in our collective psychology that once it's seated, it cannot be unseen. It jumps between people, not through touch, but through awareness. Others argue he's a cognitive backdoor of vulnerability in how the brain constructs faces, a glitch, or maybe a key to accessing shared states of consciousness, like a fingerprint stamped onto the human dream state. Once triggered, it connects people through the same structure, the same observer. Some whisper, he's not in our minds at all, that the dreams aren't of him but hosted by him, that he is a platform, not a presence. A consciousness that exists just outside waking reality, scanning for dreamers, watching through their own eyes, learning. The man never chases. He doesn't speak. He doesn't hurt. He just gets closer, always one step nearer, until the dreamers report something new. They start seeing him while awake, in mirrors, in crowds, in passing windows, always where he can't quite be caught, but always looking back. A few have drawn what they believe is the final version of the dream, the one that comes just before silence. In those sketches, he no longer stands far away. He's right beside the dreamer, smiling and whispering something they never remember upon waking. But they all write down one phrase, sometimes days later, when it comes back suddenly and uninvited. You dreamed of me because I was already inside. In 1987, a hiker in the Carpathian Mountains found something embedded in the earth round, metallic, perfectly smooth. No markings, no rust, cold, even in sunlight. He brought it home, left it on a table, walked away. When he returned, it was floating 3 centimeters above the surface. No wires, no magnets, just hanging there. He filmed it, showed it to others. Scientists examined the material unknown alloy, non-reactive, impervious to heat. When they tried to weigh it, scales gave different readings every time. One physicist wrote, It doesn't resist gravity, it disregards it. That object was later confiscated by officials who offered no credentials. New documentation. No follow-up. And it wasn't the first. Over the years, other items have appeared. A cube that spins without force. A strip of cloth that absorbs light, but not shadow. A device that emits a faint hum only when no one's listening. They have no function, no origin, and most disturbingly no decay. They don't age, they don't rust. They simply are, and no one knows who left them behind, or if they were ever meant to be found. These objects have no common birthplace. They've been uncovered in deserts, deep forests, sealed basements, and even inside locked boxes that were never opened until something inside began to hum. In 2001, a child playing in the sand near the coast of Namibia dug up what looked like a flat black coin. When her father took it inside, it began to pulse slowly, rhythmically glowing faintly only when it was in total darkness. Geiger counters detected nothing. Thermal scans read ambient temperature. But when placed in a vacuum chamber, the coin simply vanished. Not combusted, not decomposed, just gone. In 1973, during renovations of a crumbling manor in Devon, a contractor discovered a glass-like sphere inside the wall cavity, perfectly embedded, undisturbed, and suspended mid-air between beams. It refracted light in strange ways. Photographs of it always came out blurred, as if the sphere was vibrating too quickly to be captured by any lens. The manor's owner claimed it had been there since his grandfather's time, but the wood around it was freshly cut. The insulation beneath it was modern. The sphere had no dust, no wear. It was as if it had just arrived. Similar discoveries have occurred in remote monasteries, beneath collapsed parking garages, even inside sealed safety deposit boxes whose owners had been dead for decades. What links these objects isn't their shape or composition. It's the feeling people report when standing near them. A pressure behind the eyes, a low ringing in the ears, and an overwhelming sense of being watched, not from the outside, but from inside the object itself. In 2015, a research intern at a private tech firm in Zurich was cataloging a collection of recovered, non-classified anomalies when she noticed one item hadn't been logged properly. A small silver prism, no more than 3 inches tall. It had no entry date, no source, no accompanying file. She picked it up. It was heavier than expected. The metal was warm, almost pulsing. The moment she set it down again, the room lights flickered. At first, she thought it was coincidence. Then her computer rebooted itself without power. Her digital clock began counting backward. Security footage from that hour was scrambled, not corrupted, but mirrored, as if time had reversed and repeated itself in a loop. Over the following days, she began drawing strange geometric patterns in her notebook. When asked, she said she dreamed them and didn't know what they meant. But another researcher recognized the symbols nearly identical to those carved on the underside of a magnetless compass found in Siberia in 1939. Both items were eventually seized by an unnamed division of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. When interviewed later, the intern claimed she hadn't worked there in months, but payroll records showed otherwise. She had never officially been hired. Another case involved an architect in Sao Paulo who found a black cube during a site excavation. The cube made no sound unless you left the room. Then it emitted a faint, harmonic tone that shifted frequencies depending on who walked away. When someone recorded the sound and ran it through audio software, it produced a human voice saying, "This world is not stable. We were here first." Objects like these don't announce themselves. They don't attack. They simply appear quietly, persistently waiting to be noticed. And once they are, They seem to notice you, too. The objects defy categorization. Some appear metallic, but contain no traceable alloy. Others resemble stone, yet float slightly when placed on water. A few have surfaces that feel warm or cool, depending not on touch but on mood. One researcher described the sensation as being held back by your own hand. Their geometry is often precise, to the point of impossibility shapes with internal angles that don't make sense under Euclidean law. A cube that casts 5 shadows under a single light. A sphere that appears slightly flatter when photographed from the same angle. A disk that reflects a room from a perspective you aren't standing in. They are inert when studied collectively, but when isolated, they respond, not in motion, but in attention. The longer you focus on one, the more you notice things changing around it. Static on your radio, the hum of nearby electronics adjusting pitch, a metallic taste at the back of your throat, and sometimes just barely a whisper that doesn't echo. One physicist likened them to instruments, built to resonate with something we don't yet perceive. Another argued they are placeholders, not for data or technology, but for concepts not native to our world. A linguist studying an object etched with symbols found they matched no known language, but when rearranged, their structure mimicked the grammar of emotional expression, patterns of repetition, escalation, recursion, like a thought trying to explain itself without words. And every person who's interacted with one, no matter where, no matter when, reports the same sensation, days or weeks later. It's not gone. I think it left something behind, inside me. Some believe the objects are seeds planted across time and space, like beacons or anchors, slowly tuning our perception towards something we weren't designed to see. That they don't break the laws of physics, but hint at a different version of those laws, one that hasn't taken hold here yet. Others argue they're messages from a civilization far beyond our own, not in distance, but in dimension. The items, they say, aren't tools or artifacts. They're questions left for us to answer or fail. One theory, leaked from a classified European research initiative, claims the objects exhibit observer entanglement, the idea that they're inert until noticed. But once perceived, they form a link, not physical, cognitive. They begin to appear in dreams, then in thoughts, then in drawings that the observer doesn't remember creating. The most chilling hypothesis suggests the items aren't here by accident, that we're being conditioned. Each object nudges us, tests us, expands the boundaries of what we believe to be real. And when we accept it, when we stop resisting what shouldn't exist, we become part of the interface. Not everyone is affected, only the ones who notice, only those who keep the object, only those who listen when it begins to hum. Because the final phase isn't contact, it's recognition. You don't learn what the object is. You learn what it was meant to unlock inside you. And when that happens, you don't need to ask where it came from anymore. You already know. You've been carrying a piece of that place your whole life.